What will happen to Donald Trump if Marjorie Greene signs the Epstein petition? What happens when two of the loudest and most controversial figures in American politics collide on an issue as explosive as Jeffrey Epstein's legacy? Reports out of Capitol Hill suggest that Marjorie Taylor Greene, a lawmaker who has built her brand on conspiracy theories and political stunts, is now weighing whether to back a bipartisan petition demanding answers about Epstein's network and the powerful men who enabled him. But here's the twist. If Greene adds her name, it could put Donald Trump, her longtime ally and political idol, directly in the spotlight at the very moment when scrutiny around Epstein's ties to the wealthy and well-connected is intensifying. Would Greene's move be seen as betrayal, as leverage, or as a desperate bid for relevance? And more importantly, what ripple effects could it unleash for Trump's already fragile legal and political standing heading into a high-stakes election season? Stay tuned as we break it down right now. The intersection of politics, justice, and public accountability has once again come to the forefront of American political debate. The controversy surrounding Jeffrey Epstein has not faded from public memory, and the survivors of his abuse continue to call for full transparency. At the heart of the current debate is a bipartisan petition designed to compel the Department of Justice to release the complete set of Epstein files. The petition, spearheaded by Republican Representative Thomas Massie and Democratic Representative Ro Khanna, is unusual not only because of its bipartisan nature, but also because of the political risks it carries for those who sign it. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has made headlines by declaring her intent to sign this petition, despite the strong signals from Donald Trump's orbit that doing so would be viewed as a hostile act toward his administration. This development places Greene and Trump on diverging paths, raising questions about loyalty, transparency, and the balance of power within the Republican Party. The central question of this analysis is straightforward but consequential. What will happen to Donald Trump if Greene signs the petition and the effort to release the Epstein files gains momentum? To answer this, one must examine not only the specific content of the files, but also the broader political dynamics at play. This script explores those dynamics in detail, breaking down the historical background, Greene's motivations, the potential consequences for Trump, and the wider implications for American politics. The Epstein case is not a simple scandal. It represents a convergence of wealth, power, and systemic failure. Jeffrey Epstein's ability to operate for decades despite credible allegations of abuse raised troubling questions about how institutions, from law enforcement to political circles, treated powerful individuals. Epstein's 2008 plea deal in Florida, which allowed him to avoid serious consequences despite extensive evidence, is often cited as an example of how the justice system bends for the wealthy and well-connected. When Epstein was arrested again in 2019, survivors felt a renewed sense of hope that justice would finally be served. That hope was complicated when Epstein died in prison under controversial circumstances. The files currently held by the Department of Justice are believed to contain names, connections, and potentially sensitive details about individuals who were part of Epstein's network. Survivors argue that only by releasing these files can the public understand the full scope of the abuse and the enabling systems that allowed it. The petition being circulated in Congress seeks to force this disclosure, bypassing typical committee processes through the rarely used discharge petition mechanism. What makes this particular petition politically explosive is not just its subject matter, but the reaction it has provoked from Trump's circle. The White House has reportedly labeled support for the petition as a hostile act. This language is unusually strong. Typically, opposition to disclosure is framed in terms of protecting ongoing investigations, safeguarding sensitive information, or respecting legal boundaries. To frame it as hostility suggests that Trump's administration perceives a direct threat to its interests. This raises questions about what exactly might be in the files that would concern Trump or his closest allies. Even if Trump's name does not appear in a way that implies wrongdoing, the political optics of resisting disclosure are difficult. Trump has built his image on fighting corruption and standing up to elites. By opposing transparency, he risks undermining his own narrative and appearing as though he is protecting the very elites he has spent years criticizing. Marjorie Taylor Greene's decision to sign the Epstein petition marks one of the most notable departures she has taken from Donald Trump's orbit. For years, Greene has been among his most consistent defenders, often stepping forward to shield him from criticism when many of her Republican colleagues remain silent. Her loyalty has been a central feature of her political identity, making this moment of defiance particularly striking. In her public remarks, Greene framed her choice not in terms of partisanship, but in terms of morality and responsibility. She explained that as a woman and as a mother of two daughters, she could not stand by while survivors of Epstein's abuse were denied justice or while evidence remained concealed. To her, transparency is not a secondary concern, but a moral obligation. By calling for the release of all files, she argued that both survivors and the American public deserve to know the full truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be for those in positions of power. This language adds a personal dimension to her political stance, one that resonates with constituents who value accountability and justice over party loyalty. Yet the implications extend far beyond personal conviction. Greene's decision to support the petition places her at odds with Trump, who has described such efforts as hostile acts toward his administration. By breaking with him on an issue so symbolically important, she demonstrates that her allegiance is not without limits. The move could also carry broader ripple effects. Other Republicans who have been reluctant to challenge Trump may view Greene's defiance as a signal that it is possible to stand apart from him without losing credibility with their base. In this sense, Greene's decision could be the beginning of a subtle but meaningful shift within the Republican Party. The petition is significant because it represents one of the few truly bipartisan initiatives in a deeply divided Congress. Representatives Massey and Khanna come from opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, yet they share a belief in the necessity of transparency in this case. Greene's involvement adds further weight by demonstrating that even figures strongly identified with Trump's base recognize the moral and political urgency of the issue. This bipartisanship matters because it deprives Trump of one of his most effective rhetorical strategies, portraying opposition as partisan or politically motivated. When progressives, moderates, conservatives, and populists all support disclosure, it becomes more difficult for Trump to argue that the petition is simply a Democratic plot against him. The stakes for Donald Trump in this unfolding controversy are unusually high, not only because of the legal uncertainties surrounding the Epstein files, but also because of the way the issue strikes at the core of his political identity. If the Department of Justice files contain any reference to Trump, the consequences could range from relatively minor to profoundly destabilizing. Even a passing mention of his name in connection with Epstein, such as being listed at a social event or appearing in flight records, would give critics and the media grounds to frame the association as evidence of poor judgment. Such associations may not prove criminal liability, yet in the realm of politics, perception can matter just as much as fact. Should the files reveal more substantive references, the risk becomes even greater, opening the door to renewed legal scrutiny and feeding public suspicion that has lingered for years. Even if legal exposure never materializes, the reputational stakes remain severe. The Epstein scandal is one of the most widely recognized and disturbing stories in recent American history, symbolizing how wealth and influence can insulate individuals from accountability. For Trump, whose reputation has already been shaped by years of controversy, even a tenuous link could deepen doubts among crucial constituencies such as suburban voters and independents. These groups often determine the outcome of national elections, and their willingness to overlook questions of character is far more limited than that of his loyal base. The political dimension is equally significant. Greene's decision to break with Trump and embrace the petition sends a signal to other Republicans that loyalty is no longer an unbreakable rule. If even a handful of Trump's allies follow her example, he risks facing growing isolation within his own party. Such fragmentation would weaken his ability to control the narrative, complicating his efforts to present himself as the inevitable standard-bearer for the Republican movement. Strategically, the challenge is perhaps most damaging. Trump has built his brand on fighting corruption and taking on entrenched elites, a message that has resonated strongly with his supporters. By opposing the release of the Epstein files, however, he risks contradicting that very message. Greene, by casting herself as the advocate of transparency, may succeed in claiming the ground Trump once dominated, leaving him vulnerable on an issue that strikes at the heart of his political identity. Greene's decision to support the petition does not exist in isolation. It is part of a broader pattern in which she has begun to distance herself from Trump's administration on specific issues. She has criticized rising costs of living, including health insurance, car insurance, rent, and housing, attributing these difficulties to conditions under Trump's leadership. She has also accused certain MAGA influencers of being funded by foreign governments, calling for them to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. These actions suggest a deliberate strategy to carve out an independent identity. By doing so, Greene positions herself as more than just a Trump loyalist. She positions herself as a populist figure who is willing to challenge anyone, even Trump, if she believes the issue demands it. Public opinion on the Epstein scandal is both intense and bipartisan. Survivors have spoken publicly about their experiences, and their courage has resonated with many Americans. The demand for transparency is not driven solely by political elites, but by ordinary citizens who feel that justice has been denied. The release of the files is seen by many as a necessary step toward restoring trust in government. If Trump opposes this release, he risks aligning himself against public sentiment. Greene, by contrast, aligns herself with the survivors and with the broader demand for truth. This positioning could strengthen her standing with voters who value transparency. Scenario 1. Vindication. If the files are released and Trump's name is absent, he could claim vindication. He could argue that critics unfairly associated him with Epstein and that the release proves his innocence. In this scenario, Greene's decision would not harm him directly, though it might still create tension within his coalition. Scenario 2. Reputational damage. If the files mention Trump but do not allege wrongdoing, the damage would be reputational rather than legal. Opponents would use the association to question his character, while supporters would likely dismiss it as irrelevant. The overall effect would depend on how the media and the public interpret the information. Scenario 3. Political isolation. If Greene's decision inspires others to join the petition, Trump could face growing isolation within the Republican Party. This would weaken his ability to control the party's agenda and could complicate his electoral prospects. Scenario 4. Legal jeopardy. If the files contain evidence of misconduct, Trump could face serious legal consequences. While this scenario is speculative, it represents the highest level of risk. Even the perception that such evidence might exist could create significant political instability. Greene's defiance underscores the divisions within the Republican Party. Some members remain firmly loyal to Trump, while others are beginning to assert independence. The party's response to the Epstein petition could reveal deeper fractures. Supporting transparency could help the party rebuild trust with voters who believe elites are shielded from accountability. Opposing transparency risks reinforcing the perception that the party protects powerful figures at the expense of ordinary citizens. The party must also consider its long-term direction. If Trump's influence diminishes, figures like Greene may be positioned to shape the next phase of Republican politics. Her willingness to break with Trump could be an early sign of that transition. The petition also has implications for American politics more broadly. It demonstrates that bipartisan cooperation is still possible when the issue is compelling enough. The demand for justice for survivors and for accountability for elites transcends traditional partisan divides. It also highlights the importance of trust in institutions. The Department of Justice's handling of the Epstein case has already raised questions about fairness and transparency. Releasing the files could help restore confidence, while resisting disclosure could deepen public cynicism. Finally, the petition underscores the role of public opinion in shaping political behavior. Lawmakers like Greene are responding not only to personal convictions, but to the demands of their constituents who are calling for transparency. This reflects the enduring power of public pressure in a democratic system. Marjorie Taylor Greene's decision to sign the Epstein petition is a moment of significance in American politics. It represents both a challenge to Donald Trump and a broader demand for transparency. For Trump, the consequences could range from reputational damage to political isolation or even legal jeopardy, depending on what the files contain. Greene's defiance highlights cracks within Trump's coalition and suggests that his grip on the Republican Party may not be as absolute as it once was. The bipartisan nature of the petition further complicates his ability to frame opposition as partisan. Ultimately, the release of the Epstein files will be a test of whether American institutions serve the people or protect the powerful. Trump's response to this test will shape not only his own future, but also the trajectory of the Republican Party and the broader trust of Americans in their government.